Welcome back. This is going to be 1.5 Understanding External Influences, and we're going to divide this again into two separate videos. That is because there is still a lot of content, and 1.5 is probably one of the driest areas of the course. It's really fascinating depending on where your other studies lie, but there's a lot of key ideas that can become a little bit dry. So I thought if we break it up, you've got some time to digest it before you continue with the next part. So moving right along. We are jumping into, so this video we're going to cover 1.5.1, so business stakeholders, 1.5.2 technology and business, and 1.5.3 legislation and business. The following video will cover the economy and business and external influences. So 1.5.1, business stakeholders. Now, so the definition of stakeholders is anyone with an interest in a business or an organisation. So a stakeholder can literally be anyone for any reason if they have some sort of connection to that business. So what we're going to have a look at is the idea that it can be, you can be a community group. So just living down the road from a business makes you a stakeholder. If you are a part owner of that business, if you're a shareholder, you're a stakeholder. If you supply to that business, if you go into that business, you're a stakeholder as a customer, and so forth. So anyone with anything related to that business is considered a stakeholder. So here are some examples. So owners are interested in how much profit the business makes. They've got a big say in how the aims of the business are decided. Other groups also have an influence over decision making. So for example, the directors who manage the day-to-day affairs of the business, they might want higher sales to be a top priority rather than profits. Managers are concerned about their salary, so they are essentially employees of the company but need to deliver on what the owners want. Workers want to be satisfied at work. They want higher wages. They want to keep their jobs. Customers want the business to produce quality products at reasonable prices. Some customers also want good service and things like that. So we've talked a lot about, in theme 1, about the changing needs of customers. So ultimately, these are what the customers want, that's them as the stakeholders in there. Suppliers want the business to continue to buy their products. Suppliers also want your business to do well, because the better your business does, the more you're likely going to buy from that supplier. Now, if you expand your business, the supplier may have other goods and services that they can sell to you to sell within your business. So the better that you do, the better customer you're likely to be for your suppliers. Lenders, so when we talk about banks or investors, they want to be repaid on time and in full. They obviously want your business to do well because, especially if you're a limited company and your business goes bust, it's really hard for them to claim that money from you. Even if they were a sole trader and they have unlimited liability, you've also got no guarantee that you're going to get all of your money back, depending on if that person has assets or not. And then the community has a stake in the business as employers. So businesses hire local people. If a business goes bust in a particular area, there might be a lot of people in the local area out of a job. But also people want businesses in their areas to reflect the culture of the area as well. So things like that. But also if you run a factory, a lot of the neighbours, if you're running your machines 24/7, as we've talked about, machines don't have to go to sleep, but the noise they generate could be upsetting a lot of the local neighbours. So they're all stakeholders in the business as well. So moving along, so we break everything up into internal and external stakeholders. So an internal stakeholder is anyone who is inside the business. So you've got owners, managers, employees, but also shareholders are considered internal stakeholders, and that is because they own a piece of the business. I think of it as those who have access to company information would be an internal stakeholder. But obviously, as a shareholder, you've got access to all of the company's financial information and how they're performing and so forth. You're still considered an internal stakeholder, but your external stakeholders are those people who are outside of the business. So that'll be like the community groups, customers, your suppliers, the banks, the government. They're people who are interacting with your business, but they are not part of the day-to-day operation from within the business. They don't have much of a say of the organisation, of the day-to-day running of the company, but all the internal stakeholders generally do interact with that in some way, shape or form. So just some ideas as well to keep building on that stakeholder idea. In a small business, the most important or primary stakeholders are the owners, staff and customers. But in larger companies, shareholders are the primary stakeholders as they can vote out directors if they believe they're running the business badly. Less influential stakeholders are called secondary stakeholders. It's just the idea of knowing of those who are involved in the day-to-day running of the business. So shareholders obviously most shareholders may not have such a large stake in a business, say in a public company. There's you've got thousands of shares being issued on the stock market, but collectively they can all vote to say what happens in the company at the annual general meeting and all of that. Assessing business performance using accounts. What we talk about that. So a business will publish their information, all their financial information, how much they're holding, if they've bought businesses, sold businesses, if they've made any losses, what profits they've made, if they've retained any profits for further investment and so forth. So this is how owners, and so owners being also shareholders as well, can make decisions about how the company is being run. The other problem as well with the information that's going out to the public, especially if you are a private or public limited company, your rivals will know how well you're performing financially as well. And they also get insights into your business as well. Your competitors are also stakeholders in your business, because most of your competitors probably don't want you to do too well. But that becomes part of their benchmark to know how they are competing in the market with your information as well. Pressure groups can also find out information about the environmental policy. So if you have a look on the website for most big companies, they will have information around what they're doing to help the community or their environmental impact and so forth. All right. So the other big thing when we talk about stakeholders in your course, that is also about understanding the conflicting stakeholder objectives. So we've talked about earlier around what their interest in the company is. But different stakeholders will have different objectives, so the interest of groups can conflict. So owners generally want higher profits, so they may be reluctant to see the business pay higher wages to staff. A business decision to move production overseas may reduce staff costs, but it will therefore benefit owners, but it will work against the interests of the existing staff who will lose their jobs. Customers also suffer if they receive a poorer service. Now, that's not to say that poorer service will happen if you offshore your business. But also it can affect, so sometimes what we've seen in the past, when they've closed down an entire workforce that maybe employed maybe 300 or 400 or even thousands of people in a local community, it doesn't just have the impact for that business, it affects the entire local economy, as well as affecting, that's less taxes going towards the UK government, which we'll talk about later in this topic in the next video, is around the benefits of what taxes, how they help the local communities and economy as well. All right, first practice question. So explain one reason why a business may experience stakeholder conflict. So think of an example outside of what we've just discussed. It's okay, even if you use an example that we have just discussed, but put that into a BLT. So remember, at least you need that one valid point and at least 2 impacts as to why, explaining that point. That's how you get your 3 marks. Pause the video here and we'll keep going. So 1.5.2 is technology in business. So you only really need to know these 4 uses of technology for this part of the topic. You need to understand e-commerce. So it refers to the buying and selling of products and services using devices connected to the internet. So that can be PC, tablet, or mobile. Sometimes you will hear the term m-commerce, and that basically is the same as e-commerce, but the M stands for mobile. So it's people who are interacting, buying and selling, doing whatever they need to do, running their businesses from their mobile phone, which is now a new trend that we've seen, especially in the last 10 years. Social media is something that a lot of people are very familiar with. That's like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to interact, to share content with customers. So a lot of that is also around the way that people are using just social media to advertise their brands and so forth. It's getting in front of people, and also it's allowing customers actually ask questions and interact with the people within the brand themselves. So it's a way to reach a target audience a little bit better. The other one is digital communication. So social media does fall under this as well, but it is its own use of technology. But digital communication is anything that incorporates emails, text messages, but even your website's a form of communication. So when companies are posting on their websites about a new sale or new products and things that are coming out, it's all coming through their digital communication channels as well. So it's a way that somewhere that stakeholders can go to get updates on what's happening and so forth within their business. And the last one there is payment systems. So this is allowing customers to pay online via websites. So when you go to pay, even if it's bills, but it's basically you can log in through an encrypted website, you can pay for your bills, you can purchase things A lot of them will use an external or will link to their banks and so forth and link to your bank. But also things like PayPal, Apple Pay. So they're all ways that link with your finances and they're secure methods of making payments. And we'll unpack that in a moment as well. So how a business uses social media. So this is sales and marketing, interacting with customers, and communicating with stakeholders. So all things that you should all be familiar with, but we're going to unpack that just in slightly more detail, just so you can be confident if you were to get a question on this in your exam. So social media is a relatively cheap way to advertise in a visual or written form. It can be used by both large and small businesses to attract a target audience that is interested in the products and services being promoted or sold. Businesses can encourage people to follow their activities and promotions in this way, and businesses can also gain loyalty. So for example, when you are on your social media platforms or you're playing games and you are getting ads that are generally brands that you like, someone has paid for that to be targeted. It's targeting you specifically based on your demographic and your likes and dislikes and things like that, and what your internet profile's been able to collect about you. So that is a form of way. So it's not just you choosing to interact with them, they are finding ways to get their products in front of you for sales and marketing. And the more you're interested in that product, the more that they can interact with you. And that's also, it's not just about making money, but it's about building that brand loyalty and building that brand recognition. So businesses can keeping you interested, but the more you talk about their business, the more word of mouth, the more that people seem to know who they are. The next one there is using social media to interact with customers. So they can use it to see what customers are saying about their products and services. So it's not just you messaging them directly, but sometimes if you're just commenting about a product that you like or even a product that you don't like on a forum of some kind, that's actually a great way. That's good market research for them to understand how their brand is landing and how their products are being used and so forth. Additionally, customers can ask questions or express their views about the products and services of a business. So you can log into Instagram and often talk directly to someone from the organization. A lot of these big companies, even small companies as well, have teams of people who work in their social media departments. So they can literally be working live around the clock so they can interact with their customers. So these customer interactions need to be handled carefully, as inaccurate or inappropriate responses can be shared quickly and easily, creating bad publicity for the business. So this is where you need to be really careful for a business, because if you put anything into writing and you say something wrong or you make a false claim or an incorrect promise, that's now in writing, and you can now be held accountable for those things that you say. Using social media to communicate with stakeholders. Social media platforms such as LinkedIn can be used to make contact with other businesses and network with relevant people and organisations. Many businesses now use social media as part of their recruitment process, not just for advertising vacancies, but to also gain an insight into any applicants by looking at their social media activity. So what that idea is that, and I used to work in corporate, and that's what people would do. When you had applicants coming through, they would do searches on those people to have a look to see what they've got on social media. So you might say that, you're really responsible, you study all the time, you never party and so forth. And someone then gains access to your Facebook and they can see that you're out every Saturday night partying till 4 a.m. They might go, okay, well, maybe this person is a bit misleading. So companies are using social media to get an idea of who people are as well. And that is something that is actually happening. It's not an invasion of privacy, because anything that you put on social media or anything that's essentially put out on the public website is available for public consumption. Social media is also used to communicate with stakeholders. So we call them closed or private social media tools, are often used in big companies. So it might look a lot like Facebook, but basically it's like an internal organization where different departments can promote different people who work in their department, different projects that they're working on, and make announcements to the whole company. So it's kind of like a Facebook, but just for people who work in the organization. So it becomes an actual business tool of communication. All right. So digital communication tools, these are mostly self-explanatory. We think of email, the way that people can email people internally within an organization, externally with your customers, with suppliers. It's obviously replaced a lot of written communication in other formats. Mobile phones themselves are a tool. So applications on the phones are also tools themselves, but the phones are the hardware that get used and can be used in many different ways. You can make calls, you can send text messages, and then you've also got ways of communicating with people through the actual applications, not just social media, but it might be, you've got accounting software tools and things like that. And through those accounting tools, you can be communicating with clients by sending them invoices. Clients can pay using those tools as well, and so forth. As we talked about before, your websites, they're a digital communication tool because that's where you can make public announcements, advertise different products and services. Web conferencing is a huge one that's cropped up in the last few years, especially because of COVID. So things like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, people are able to actually operate their business as they would in person now through an internet platform. So for example, you can have a meeting with your bank and talk about a business loan or make pitches for business ideas, and you don't have to be in the same physical presence anymore. And that is what web conferencing has done. Cloud services. So traditionally, people used to buy software that they used to install on their computers, and then they would perform what tasks they needed to do. Now, a lot of software is done via cloud. So what we mean by that is people can log into a website instead of having to install content on their computers, which means they can access that software from any computer in the world as long as they've got a login, and that's safe. So as long as there's an internet connection, they can do their work remotely. So that's what the cloud services are. So a lot of accounting software is now done on the cloud, and various other conferencing, and most web conferencing services are also cloud-based as well. Instant messaging, so that's just any form of, so it's inbuilt into a lot of social media platforms. But there's instant messaging services as well through things like Skype and all of that. So that's just online chatting, and that has proven to be more efficient. Using online chatting rather than emails is considered to be more efficient and so forth. So they're all examples of digital communication tools. Now, moving along to payment methods. Basically, what this slide is really just telling us here is that the amount of people using cash to pay for transaction is dropping at a rapid rate. And they predict that by the year 2028, about only 9% of all payments will be made with cash. So this is because we now have debit cards, credit cards, and these are also considered to be more secure. They have PIN, you have all different ways, but this is constantly changing. So for example, contactless payments, you don't need a PIN for, or for most transactions, you don't need a PIN. And this was done to save time, because traditionally you used to have to swipe your card, the terminal would have to call the bank, and it would take maybe a couple of minutes to make a payment on card, but that was fine. Now that for transactions, the slide says it's under £30, but I think that's been increased by most banks. So as long as it's under £100, and that's the idea, is that you can make transactions super speedy as you're checking out. If it's just for like incident, for little payments like at convenience stores and things like that, you just shake your card and literally you pay and you go. Chip and PIN obviously for bigger purchases. But you've also got technology now with smartphones like Apple Pay and Google Pay. People are able to pay just swiping their phone. So people don't even need to carry plastic cards anymore, which obviously reduces the risk of people stealing your cards, because most people know where their phones are, but often people can be a little bit more careless about where their wallets are because now everything's being done on their phone. So it's just, and that's also part of the changing customer needs as well as the changing technology. There are now some banks where they've got like contactless payment within like jewelry. You actually just need to tap your ring onto the payment terminal, and that's how you can pay for things as well. So that's an example of how payment methods are changing. But that also includes online payment methods like websites and PayPal and things like that. Anywhere where the cash changes hand in that technology for part of how we're stimulating business. All right, so the impact of technology. So one is obviously sales increasing and costs decreasing. So this is how we need to think of it, because these are the types of questions you are likely to see on your assessment, on your exams. So how does technology help businesses to increase their sales, and how does it help to decrease their costs? So to increase your sales, you can reach more customers using technology. So obviously now, instead of just having a shop front, you're now using the internet to reach a wider audience. But now using social media, you're actually pushing your brand onto people who are in your target demographic. You're trying to reach more customers, and that can be on a global scale. You are able to sell all the time. Even though you might not be chatting with people individually, the technology is working 24/7, and they can go to your online store and make a purchase at 3 a.m. and they could be in another country like Australia. So they work in a completely different time zone, but they can still be impacting and increasing your cash flow. You can also automate stock control. There are abundance of other ways that you can increase your sales using technology, but at least if you've got 3 ideas there, they're 3 ideas that you can unpack into a BLT. And decreasing their costs, so you're able to compete as a small business. So for example, in the past, sometimes it was the bigger stores that managed to sort of capitalize on having the monopoly on the market. Now a lot of smaller businesses can compete with the bigger businesses in a whole different array of abilities. So I've got an example there is eBay. You don't even need to set up your own website to set up your own store and get your own platform. You can do it all through eBay. You can set yourself up as an eBay retailer. And all you can do, you still sort of create the own flavor for your brand, but you use the eBay platform to sell to your customers and so forth. And they can also do your payment management and so forth in that as well. It reduces your paperwork. So now, because we've got things where like accounting software and things like that, when you need to send an invoice to a client, you don't have to worry about printing invoices off, sending it to them. Everything can happen instantaneous. You can invoice a customer, and within 10 minutes, they can already have read your email, seen your invoice, paid it online, and you've already received the cash. And you could be, on the other side of the country, those services. It reduces travel costs because you don't need to travel to see clients as much. So with web conferencing, it's seen a lot of reduction in business travel on airlines because people can talk to people all around the world using internet technology, and it's still face-to-face, it's still personal, and so forth. And the idea that we can replace bricks with clicks, this is probably the biggest one that talks, because obviously setting up a store or a physical premises, really expensive. You've got to pay rent, you've got to pay overheads, electricity, you have to have your internet and so forth, all these expenses that you have to pay for having a physical store or a physical business operation. By doing it online, you're not paying for all these things. You might be paying for web browsers and whatnot, other things that you will pay for, like cloud storage and so forth. But those costs by comparison are much lower than having a physical premises. So this is ways that we can decrease costs. Now remember, if we increase our sales or decrease costs, these are both ways that we can increase our profit. So if we think about, these are both strategies of how you would increase your business's profit. All right, exam practice. Explain one drawback that advancements in technology, I can't see the full question there. Yeah, so explain one drawback that advancements in technology might have on a business. So again, this will be a 3-marker. You can pause the video here. For the rest of us, let's keep going. So this is 1.5.3. This is legislation and business. So there's a few ideas that we want to unpack here. So the first thing is the sale of goods legislation. This is civil law. So it gives consumers rights to compensation if a product they buy is not of merchantable quality and it's not as described or fit for purpose. So what this means is basically if you don't get what you pay for. So often if you buy things online, you've got a description of what that product is. You have a right to receive the product that you have purchased. If you've purchased a size small or a size medium, you need to receive a size small and size medium because that is what you have ordered. So accidents do happen. We do get the wrong sizes from time to time, but ultimately it is the merchant's responsibility to replace that good or service if they have done the wrong thing as part of, basically you're entitled to get what you pay for. So it needs to be match the description and it needs to be proper quality. So if it's a faulty item, that is also their responsibility to replace that. And it needs to be fit for purpose. So you need to be using it in the way that it was intended for, and so forth. So this act helps consumers get compensation when things go wrong. But what you'll probably find, most companies will actually replace that good because it's also good for their brand. However, it is a cost for that business. If you return something, in many cases, they can't just go and resell it. They have to get it back to their suppliers and things like that, or they might just have to write it off as a bad sale. So that's how businesses will make losses as well. So they obviously, it's in their best interest to sell you quality goods so that you don't come back wanting refunds of things and so forth. But the legislation is there to protect you as the consumer, that you will get what you pay for. Now, so that is civil law. So that is generally, it's making sure that they are doing the right thing. Now, the trades description legislation, this falls under criminal law. So it makes businesses liable for prosecution by the government and fines if a product is sold in a misleading way. So there's one thing for something not being the right, you need to receive what you've paid for, but there's when people are falsely advertising or misleading you to buy a certain product. So when they've got claims of, if you use this, you will automatically, lose 5 kilos or things like that. False or misleading information. Also, sometimes when they publish things like, 98% of doctors recommend this product. And often what you're looking, if you see it, that advertising, you can see in really fine print, there might be how they've actually calculated that 98%. And that's also to make sure that they are not misleading you. So there are little caveats in there, which is why you often see little writing at the bottom of ads. But ultimately, if they give false information, and this is like consciously giving it, it's not like an accidental mistake. But also if they are aggressive or specific selling practices are also banned outright. So for example, if petrol stations, so this is what petrol stations have been caught out doing in the past, they price fix, in the area, they agree to put their price a little bit higher in the area so everyone can capitalize and basically get extra money from customers in the area. So that's price fixing, and that's an illegal practice as well. So criminal laws means you can not only get fined, but sometimes there's also imprisonment as well. Okay. So businesses breaking into these regulations can be taken to court and fined, as they would be breaking the law. So the reason that effects of consumer legislation on businesses, so it costs for compliance, so making sure that you're doing everything. So laws do keep changing on a regular basis. So it's making sure that so someone in your business needs to be making sure that it is acting legally at all times. So many businesses will have an in-house lawyer or will have a lawyer that they seek to keep them updated, making sure. And that's also part of the cost of knowing the law. So you need to be informed. You can't claim that you didn't know something because that's not a legal defense. It is your business to know the law of your area of business. And it obviously can affect your revenues and profits, because if you've got to pay to have a lawyer, whether it's part of your staff or whether it's just you've got that relationship with a law firm, they are an additional cost for your business, which obviously reduces your profits, things like that. But also in some of there are laws where you can't overcharge on certain things or undercharge on certain things and things like that. So there are parts of the law that can impact the actual way you do your price setting methods and things like that. So discrimination is prejudice resulting in denial of opportunity or unfair treatment. So when we talk about discrimination, we generally talk about it in relation to age, gender, race, disability, religion, sexual orientation, but also there are others. But these are the ideas where discrimination falls into the materials. And it is unlawful to treat someone negatively against one of these areas. So we're going to just have a quick look at a few quick examples here. So the law, obviously, the Equality Act 2010 was designed to prevent discrimination on a number of grounds. These grounds are called protected characteristics, and they include, like what we've mentioned before, but also things like pregnancy and maternity, and so forth as well. Marital status, gender, we talked, sexual orientation, race, religion, age, pregnancy and maternity, disability. So in the past, for example, a lot of women were overlooked for certain jobs because the idea that companies didn't want to employ them and train them and make sure that they had it, because they thought that they'd just get married and go off and have kids. And that, that was disruptive to a business. So that is not a reason now not to hire women. And that's also why the government has initiatives where they will pay companies, they will pay for employees' maternity leave and stuff, so that the company won't be out of pocket. But the company will obviously still have to pay and train for someone to replace those roles and things like that. But also things like age preference. So don't get me wrong, these practices still happen today, where people are being overlooked because they're considered to being too old for the job or something, or too young for the job. But ultimately, the law is there to protect the individuals, but the employers have to be able to prove beyond a doubt that they have done that person who claims that they're being discriminated against actually isn't being discriminated, but the other person they've employed for a job or promoted or so forth was literally the better person for the role. So that's kind of where it comes into play. So it can get a bit grey, but these are the areas where you cannot, and that also includes customers. So I think there was a big case in America a few years ago, just when they legalized same-sex marriage. I think it was someone who made cakes. They refused to make a cake for a gay couple because they didn't believe, they were very Christian. They didn't believe that gay people should be married, so they actually discriminated against their customers. Their customers took them to court, and I believe they won. So they actually got paid. I think they received money they were able to sue under the law of discrimination. So customers, suppliers, internal, so your internal stakeholders as well, no one is allowed to be discriminated against. So principles of employment law. So the term employment law refers to any piece of government legislation that is designed to protect employees from exploitation in the UK. So there's 4 that we mainly look at. So there's recruitment, pay, discrimination, health and safety. The recruitment basically outlines what employers can and cannot do when recruiting staff and what their responsibilities are once a job offer has been made. For pay, the legislation covers pay and is designed to ensure that all workers receive is above the set minimum level. So that falls under the National Minimum Wage Act in 1998. Discrimination is exactly what we were just talking about a moment ago. It's the area of employment law that is designed to ensure that employers treat all people fairly. And health and safety. So legislation around health and safety is designed to keep employees safe while they're at work. Every employee has the right to return home safely after going to work. So in a high level, so complying with all of these legislations can be really expensive. So it incurs a range of additional costs in terms of time and money. So a lot of this require a lot of training. So for example, health and safety, even if it's common sense, employers have to make sure that they know. They can never assume that an employer knows how to pick up a box properly or do something properly. So they have to ensure that training is carried out. And that can be really expensive to make sure all of your employees know all of these things, even if they're just. But that's the only way that an employer can be sure that they're having, that their workplace, everyone knows by giving them that training and so forth. So there's lots of ideas. Obviously, when the law changes and minimum wages are increased, that can be a huge impact. So if you're employing 2,000 people in a factory and they're all just getting minimum wage, as soon as that national minimum wage is increased, that could be millions of dollars per year more that you need to now pay. And maybe some businesses cannot afford that. So that can have a massive flow-on effect with things like that in a business. So consequences of meeting legal obligations. So these are generally the good things. Providing products and services that meet or exceed legal requirements will gain a business a good reputation for reliable and trustworthy products. As this reputation grows, sales are likely to increase and more customers are attracted to them. Complying with employment law means that staff will feel more confident, that they will be safe at work and that their employer takes its responsibilities seriously. This can bring a number of benefits. So it includes staff are more likely to work harder, which results in the business being more efficient. Staff are more likely to stay working for that business, which reduces recruitment costs. And the business is more likely to gain a good reputation, which makes it easier to recruit new staff. So the good idea of that is, so for example, I've got a friend who works for TUI, the airline, the holiday package deals, and basically they're treated so well at work that everything that they talk about they talk about their work so positively that friends and family all want to book their holidays through the same company. So they actually become a really good source of advertising for their business because they are treated well. People want to go and work for them because people speak so highly about them and so forth. Also, a lot of the staff have then been there with them for so many years because they are treated well. So it also reduces the cost of having to recruit and train new staff to get them to that same level. So these are the benefits there. Consequences of not meeting the legal obligations. So businesses that choose not to comply with the law are likely to face a number of issues. Employees could find themselves in court or an employment tribunal, which means they may have to pay expensive legal fees. Employers may have to pay fines and compensation if they break the employment laws. And the business's reputation could be damaged by bad publicity, which could result in the loss of sales and staff. Now, suppliers and stakeholders may be reluctant to be associated with the business. So ultimately, even if you've done all of the right things, you can still find yourself in an employment tribunal because now employees have a lot more rights. It's a lot easier to access the law in order to be able to, if you feel like you've been fired unfairly, you can access unfair dismissal laws a lot easier. So a lot of businesses still have to keep up with those expenses. So you want to minimize the risk of being in those tribunals, obviously by doing the right thing where you can. There is such thing as bad employees, and you do need to manage those employees, but make sure that you're doing everything the right way. All right. So I want you to discuss the drawback that legislation can have on a business. So this is a 6-mark question. So we're looking for 2 BLTs here. So when we talk about discussing the drawbacks, so we're looking at the negatives or the disadvantages of what will happen with legislation. So have a think about it. Pause the video here. All right, we're going to go through the sample answers. This is the halfway point for this content. We'll be looking at the economy in the next video. So some practice answers, and again, these do not mean that you have to do them this way. They're just examples of ways that these questions can be unpacked. So explain one reason why a business may experience stakeholder conflict. 3 marks. So the shareholders may be in conflict with the managers over what happens with profits the business makes. This is because shareholders want to receive as much of the profits as possible in dividends. However, managers want to retain profits so they can reinvest to expand the business for further financial growth. So the next question was explain one drawback that advancements in technology might have on a business. So a business may need to invest heavily in technology in the first place, which can be very expensive. This is because staff may also need training. This leads to increased costs well beyond that of the initial investment in new technology, equipment, or machinery. And the last one that we looked at was discuss the drawbacks that legislation can have on a business. So ultimately, it's 2 BLTs. You want to start thinking when you get to the 6 markers, you want to start doing a full BLT. So that's full. So that's your valid point and 3 impacts that are going to follow it, because you want your examiner to know that you know your stuff. So in complying with legislation, a business may incur additional expenditure. This is because they will have to keep up to date with changes in legislation, which may also involve training staff. This would increase the total costs of the business. As a result, they would have to sell more products in order to break even. This could make it harder for a business to survive in their market. Another drawback is that if they fail to comply, the business could see damage to its reputation. For example, if there was an accident to an employee at work and it was discovered that the business hadn't complied with health and safety legislation, they may have to pay compensation to the injured party. As a result, the business could get negative publicity. This may not only have an impact on future recruitment, but also on levels of sales. Customers may decide to purchase from a more reputable business. This could have consequences to a business in terms of survival. There's more probably in that answer that you need to do, but you need to think about unpacking your idea about how does this all link together. So don't just go to the business might fail, or they'll have no profit. If you're going to use those as your examples, you need to expand that idea as well as to why they might lose profit, as to why the business might fail. You need to make sure that your ideas are linked. If you do not have linked ideas, you will not get the marks. All right, that's the end of this video. We'll see the rest of it on the next one. Cheers.